America, where food was once cheaper than gas, store shelves were never empty, and a full meal was a given. But what about now? One egg makes people hesitate. A loaf of bread becomes a hard choice. What is happening to the world's #1 consumer paradise that's making people panic and stores run out? 10 U.S. states in the eye of the crisis storm? Let's find out. California, when the consumer paradise falls into the trap of scarcity. California, a symbol of prosperity and innovation, is witnessing a frightening paradox. People here are increasingly struggling to access the most basic necessities of daily life. Food prices in this state have soared to 21% above the national average, turning the purchase of eggs, milk, or bread, once seen as basic, into a difficult journey. It's no longer rare for consumers to drive through multiple neighborhoods, stopping by each supermarket, each corner store, just to gather enough ingredients for a simple meal. But what about those who can't do that? The elderly, those living alone, people without personal vehicles. They're not only trapped in food shortages, but also pushed into total social isolation, where survival needs collide with helplessness. Even more worrying is the widespread wave of major supermarket chains shutting down across California. Stores that once stood as community pillars, places that provided not just food but human connection, are vanishing one by one. In suburban and rural areas, this means the once consumer oases are turning into food deserts, places where no store within miles can provide the essentials a family needs. This crisis isn't simply the result of inflation or supply chain disruption. It reflects the fragility of a consumer system once considered strong, now crumbling under accumulated pressures from inequality, over-urbanization, and a lack of protective policies for vulnerable groups. New York, a city radiant in lights, quietly hungry in the shadows. New York, once praised as the heart of the modern world, is facing a bitter paradox. The dream of prosperity is being strangled from within by hunger itself. Among the dazzling avenues and gleaming glass towers, a crisis is quietly spreading. Food insecurity is no longer a problem of the few. It has become an everyday reality for millions of residents. This city now leads the nation in the rate of people lacking food, a painful wound at the center of one of the wealthiest urban areas in America. In supermarkets and stores, prices are rising as if to test the poor's patience. Eggs reaching $7, vegetables over $10, while average worker wages fail to keep pace. For many, planning meals is no longer a routine, but a survival puzzle. Even the right to eat, something seemingly most basic, is being pulled away from low-income communities. As traditional markets close en masse, replaced by distant supermarket chains or none at all in poor areas, residents are forced to live in food deserts, where physical distance is the barrier between hunger and a full stomach. Meanwhile, luxury towers keep rising, high-end restaurants stay packed, and million-dollar banquets continue inside five-star hotels. The contrast between opulence and need has never been clearer. The elderly, immigrants, single-parent families, they are unseen, unheard, unprotected. A city once a beacon of hope now makes people choose between food and survival. This is no longer just an economic crisis, but a moral collapse of a system that allows hunger to thrive in the heart of America's wealthiest city. And the question that can no longer be avoided is, if New York, a symbol of civilization, can't feed its own people, then what city can? New York is so rich, yet still makes its people choose between a decent meal and rent. Who do you think is to blame? Leave your opinion below. Texas, the American dream took a turn here. Texas, a land once seen as a symbol of freedom, self-reliance, and defiance. But if you come here today, you'll see a different image. Not cattle, not oil, not endless highways, but people, hungry and in line. By 4 a.m., under the dim yellow lights of charity centers, silent lines snake around neighborhoods. They're not there to protest, not there for discounts. They're there to receive food. Not Texas specialties. Just a few boxes of noodles, milk, canned vegetables. some don't get enough and leave empty-handed. Food prices have jumped 17 to 23%, but this rise isn't printed in the papers. It's etched into the lives of 1.6 million households surviving on food aid, a number not featured in travel ads, but present in the restless sleep of millions of Texans. In remote areas where even a gas station is a luxury, food is no longer something you choose. It's something you hope is still on the shelf. Empty shelves, wilted produce, and the eyes of children asking their mothers, "What are we eating today?" Texas has no shortage of land, no shortage of cattle farms, no shortage of high-tech agricultural systems. But its own people are going hungry on their own soil. That's not just a tragedy, that's a betrayal. Because if in Texas, once proudly called the land of opportunity, people are fighting over cans of beans, then the American dream didn't die from a single blow. It's dying slowly, each morning, each hungry belly. Florida, the sunshine paradise, and the empty plates. Florida, where the sun shines year-round, where the wealthy vacation, where tourists flood theme parks with smiles on their faces. But leave behind the white sand beaches and upscale neighborhoods, and you'll see another Florida, where people must choose between a meal or a prescription. The population is booming, high-rises spring up by the day, but the supply chain trails behind like the weak shadow of a system gasping for air. Food prices have risen up to 22%, and for families living on hourly wages, every grocery trip means cutting something out: meat, vegetables, or their own health. In many low-income neighborhoods, especially among communities of color and immigrants, discount grocery chains are pulling out, as if turning their backs on the people who need them most. They leave behind neighborhoods with no markets, no fresh greens, no fish or meat. Only convenience stores, high prices, and canned food. A single mother must decide, buy a pack of ground beef or save money for her child's asthma medication. Seniors on Social Security are forced to skip meals to pay the electric bill. And in the low-rise buildings no one posts selfies from, thousands are living on the edge of survival. Right in a state with one of the largest economies in America, Florida is not just losing vegetables, it's losing fairness. When growth doesn't include protection for the vulnerable, we don't call it development, we call it abandonment. Alaska, the frozen land and the cost of survival. In Alaska, residents are facing a harsh reality not only because of the freezing weather, but also due to sky-high living costs, especially food prices. Transporting goods to this state is difficult due to rugged terrain, year-round cold climate, and its remote distance from the rest of the U.S. These factors make the price of essentials, especially food, often double or even triple that of other states. Given the situation, people have little choice but to stockpile food for months to meet basic needs, especially in winter when access to supplies becomes even more limited. However, this leads to unbalanced diets. Fresh vegetables become rare, protein sources are low quality, resulting in a range of health issues like malnutrition, obesity, and diabetes. Notably, the biggest paradox is that even when food is expensive, people still suffer from illnesses common in low-income communities, where nutrition is replaced by processed, lower quality, longer lasting, and cheaper foods. The problem is not just a matter of logistics or prices, but a warning bell about food access inequality in geographically unique regions. The disparity in access to fresh, healthy food among communities in the U.S., even within the same developed country, highlights the need for more sustainable support policies, such as food subsidies, investment in local agriculture, or indoor farming technology adapted to cold climates. Alaska, therefore, is a vivid example that poverty and undernutrition do not only exist in resource-poor areas, but also in places challenged by nature and neglected by distribution systems. Hawaii, paradise in the Pacific and the thirst for food sovereignty. Amid the clear blue waters and rustling coconut trees of Hawaii, a place dubbed a tourist paradise, lies a bitter paradox. Local people are struggling to feed themselves on this fertile land. Despite its favorable climate and diverse soil, Hawaii still imports up to 85% of its daily food from the mainland, a rate that makes this island one of the most vulnerable places when global supply chains break down. Just a single disruption in maritime transport, a major storm, a strike, or a logistical breakdown, can trigger immediate consequences. Empty shelves, soaring prices. A gallon of milk can reach $8, a loaf of bread hits $6, numbers that reflect not just transportation costs but the long-standing price of dependence. Many Hawaii residents, especially native laborers already burdened by a pricey housing market and stagnant wages, are forced to leave their homeland in search of a more stable life on the mainland. They leave not because they have lost love for the island, but because they can no longer pay for life's bare necessities. The cost of eating a simple meal becomes a survival equation, a painful paradox between nature's abundance and a broken distribution system. Hawaii is not just grappling with expenses, but is raising the alarm for a much bigger crisis: the crisis of food sovereignty in the age of globalization. An island that cannot feed itself will forever remain hostage to the outside world. Investing in local agriculture, closed-loop farming technology, and rethinking the entire food supply chain are not just technical solutions, they are political, cultural, and moral acts. This paradise may still be green, but without systemic change, it will slowly become a place its people can only look at but no longer live in. Mississippi, a food desert in the heart of America. As one of the poorest states in the U.S., Mississippi sees nearly 20% of its population living below the poverty line. In many rural areas where the only grocery store has shut down due to losses, people are left with no option but cheap canned and fast food, items poor in nutrition, but the most accessible in an under-resourced system. No fresh vegetables, no clean meat, no farmers' markets. These communities have become true food deserts. And from that, health problems spread: diabetes, obesity, malnutrition, not from overeating, but from nutritional hunger. Chronic illness gradually becomes the inevitable outcome of a system that fails to guarantee the basic right to access healthy food. Mississippi tells not just a story of hunger and poverty, but exposes the injustice in how America invests in and distributes its social infrastructure. In places where food choices are determined more by ZP code than income, this cannot be dismissed as a personal outcome. The issue lies not in eating habits, but in a system that has long abandoned small, poor, and remote communities. To fix this, we need more than charity or food aid. We need long-term investment strategies in food retail infrastructure, development of local agriculture, and meaningful policies so that healthy meals are no longer a privilege, but a basic right. Chicago, a big city, a silent hunger. Right in the heart of one of America's largest and wealthiest cities, over 500,000 people in Chicago live in food deserts, places with no supermarkets, farmers markets, or fresh food stores. The hardest hit areas are working-class neighborhoods and communities of color, where major retail chains quietly pull out, leaving gaps that small businesses can't fill. To get vegetables or a loaf of bread, many must drive dozens of kilometers. But for those without vehicles, especially the elderly, low-income individuals, or single mothers, food becomes a luxury out of reach. They're left behind in a crowded city, yet live as though in isolation. This situation is not just a logistics issue, but the result of decades of discrimination in urban planning, investment, and market policies. When retailers leave in the name of profit, people are treated like numbers in a financial report, rather than human beings with essential needs. The right to access healthy food, seemingly obvious in a modern society, is being stripped away right in the economic center of the U.S. Chicago makes it clear: food inequality doesn't just exist in rural or remote areas. It sits just across the tracks, beyond every shiny avenue, where the distance between food and poverty isn't measured in miles but in systemic neglect. West Virginia, when candy outnumbers carrots. In West Virginia, nearly one-third of the population lives in areas with no supermarket or food market within reachable distance. For many, gas stations or convenience stores are the main sources of food. Shelves packed with soda, chips, and candy, while fresh vegetables are nearly non-existent. This isn't just a poverty of choices, but a chain of consequences silently attacking public health. West Virginia ranks among the top states in the country for obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. These illnesses don't stem solely from personal lifestyle, but are direct results of a broken food system, where geography, lack of retail infrastructure investment, and economic inequality together suffocate the right to access healthy food. Here, food choices don't reflect habits, but living conditions. When whether or not you eat vegetables depends on having a car, the issue clearly lies not in willpower but in structure. West Virginia doesn't need advice like eat clean, live healthy. They need supermarkets, buses, local markets, and system-level investment policies. The health picture of a community starts with the food shelves around them. And in West Virginia, those shelves are saying more than any health report ever could. If a car decides whether you get to eat vegetables, is it still fair to blame personal choice? What do you think? Arizona, hunger in the heart of the desert. In the sun-scorched sands of Arizona, getting a healthy meal isn't easy. Many families must drive over 30 minutes just to reach the nearest grocery store. A simple trip for those with cars, but a major obstacle for those without. Meanwhile, 1 in 7 residents live in food insecurity, and children make up nearly 20% of that. A figure showing the quiet toll bearing down on the next generation. This situation isn't randomly distributed. Native and Latino communities, often living in remote areas or neighborhoods long shaped by discrimination, are being left behind. They lack basic infrastructure, food markets, and rarely receive adequate social support. These inequalities are measured not just by geographic distance, but by gaps in policy, funding, and attention. Arizona clearly shows that food insecurity doesn't just exist in poor rural areas or forgotten urban communities. It can happen in the heart of a developed state, when the food distribution system isn't designed to serve everyone. And in that desert, it's not thirst, but hunger that erodes the hopes of many families each day. A missed meal might seem small to the world, but for someone, it's a whole day of waiting. When what used to be normal becomes a luxury, silence is no longer an option. People are panicking, shelves are empty. 10 U.S. states are at the heart of the crisis storm. If you believe everyone deserves to be fed, stand with us. Subscribe not just to learn more, but to face the truth together and make sure no one goes hungry in the dark.